Welcome to Tips, the Townsend Institute podcast series, a show produced by the Townsend Institute at Concordia University, Irvine. This podcast shares stories of leadership, coaching, and counseling experiences that have shaped the lives and careers of our guests, who then provide tips aimed toward helping listeners grow in both their personal and professional lives. I'm Dr. John Townsend, psychologist, organizational consultant, and author of over 30 books, including the New York Times best-selling Boundaries series. I'm also the founder of the Townsend Institute, and I'm excited to introduce your podcast hosts, Dr. Ashlie Andrew and Dr. Gilbert Fugit.
Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to a very special edition of the Townsend Institute podcast series. Happy Halloween. Gilbert and I are joined here today by Dr. John Townsend himself, and we are going to get into all things spooky, scary, and fearful in this episode. So welcome, gentlemen. How's it going?
Hey, this is fun. I can't wait to talk to John about Halloween and fear and everything else. So
I love this, and I love a good scare. I can't wait.
Well, this is going to be good. Hopefully, we're not scaring too many people away. Sit in and listen in because we have a lot of interesting tidbits as we go into kind of the psychology and neuroscience behind fear. But before we get started with those questions, we got to start off with something a little bit more fun. We need to know, John, what is the best Halloween costume you or your family have ever worn?
My wife, Barbara, and I talked about this when I saw the question, and I thought, what is it? Because we had a lot of them when the kids were little. And our favorite was what she and I did one time. We did the Mary Poppins characters. So she was Mary Poppins, runs around with the umbrella. And I was the chimney sweep, Chim Chim Cheree, that Dick Van Dyke played, and Judy Andrews was Mary. And it was a lot of fun, and she wasn't scary. She was beautiful, and I was kind of scary in a freaky way, but it was fun.
That is a fun one. That's pretty good. I like that. Gilbert, do you have any to add in?
A few years ago, I didn't think this all the way through. It was a hot night, and I got one of those inflatable dinosaur thing. It was Alien. It was Alien. Looked like I was being abducted by an alien thing. And it was great, except it was really hot, and so I kind of regretted that. It had like a generator and everything. So
you had to deflate as the night went on.
Yes, I had to call it good. So, but what about you, Ashley? What's yours?
Oh man, it's funny. Before having a family, I was never a huge fan of Halloween, but when you have young kids, you kind of have to be. So now I love it. A few years ago, I would have to say one of my favorites was we did the Toy Story thing. And I was 9 months pregnant. And so my husband went as Woody, and my oldest daughter went as Jessie, the little cowboy characters. And then I went as their horse, Bullseye, because I was about as big as a horse. So I just galloped around or waddled around all night. And I ate a lot of candy because I had every excuse to. So it was good.
It was good. Oh, wow.
John, we're going to start off with something in terms of understanding fear. So can we start with just how do you explain the psychological basis of fear and how our brain processes it and why it's just such a powerful emotion?
Yeah, let's start off with emotions 101, Ashley. I think it's the best way to start. What is the function of an emotion in the first place? God gave them to us, so they've got to be good and useful. All emotions, whether pleasant or unpleasant, are signals. They're basically like when you've got a fever and you take your temperature and you get a certain degree temperature, that's a signal that you might have a fever could be bacterial, it could be hormonal, it could be viral. That's all emotion is. They're telling you information. And specifically, fear has a message that it's signaling, which is there's a danger to avoid. Either a danger of something outside of me or a danger of something internal to me. And that's the message. And we have to pay attention to it. And where it locates in the brain is a place called the amygdala. It's about the size of a walnut. And the amygdala, here at the Institute, we call it Amy. Amy G. Dalla. Her middle name is G. Amygdala is Amy G. Anyway, it's really how I remember it. And you might have heard of fight and flight. It's the one that just does the reactions. And When I've studied it, I added a couple. There's fight, flight, and then there's freeze or fold. Sometimes we freeze, we get paralyzed with anxiety and fear. And sometimes we fold and say, do what you want to with me. I don't have any more strength. But the amygdala is where fear is from. And when you said, why is it so powerful? It's so powerful because it's a survival fear. Sorry, it's a survival emotion. Think about our emotions that are positive, like desire and longing and meaning and love. Well, those are wonderful, but you've got to have that defense before you go the offense. Offense would be all the things we want and pursue and feel good about. It's like God said, I got to give you a little fail safe here because this might put you in a train wreck. So it's powerful because you got to survive.
I like that you had to survive. I hadn't heard the fold one. I've heard of fight and flight and even freeze, but the fold, that's a good one there. And so I know sometimes fear leads a lot of folks. We talk about anxiety, right? How do fear and anxiety differ from a psychological perspective?
It's a great question, Gilbert. Fear is often seen as a response to a real danger, a perceived danger, and it can be really adaptive in letting us avoid harm. It's very straightforward survival response. Like, when you're pulling out, you got your kids in your car and you're pulling out and somebody's getting ready to T-bone you, who just kind of runs a red light. You feel this fear. That's not anxiety. It's a focused feeling.
Mm.
Anxiety is more of a manifestation, generally, of deeper psychological conflicts, internal struggles. Like, for example, um, a good counselor might explore how an unconscious conflict, maybe of being left behind or being controlled or judged, might lead to anxiety. And it's not always clear what the object of the anxiety is. With
Hmm.
fear, I'm afraid of that person yelling at me, or I'm afraid of this train coming down the track. Anxiety can be generalized, and people something goes, I don't know, I wake up kind of shaky in the mornings, and I'm always in dread, and I don't know what it's about, and they need to see a counselor to unlock it. And the other part is that anxiety can just be about existential concerns. Will I succeed in life? Will I be around? Will I have a future? So they're related, but one's more specific and reality based. The other tends to be deeper and have more kind of like an angst to it.
Yeah. So that's in as you think about the fear, right? I mean that's right away. Boom, you can tell where it's coming from. It makes sense, and it can come back and things. But I hadn't thought about that with anxiety. Yeah, you just sometimes don't know what's causing that, and that is a good reason to talk to a therapist about
Yeah,
that. So
in the psychological nomenclature, there's a disorder called generalized anxiety disorder,
mhm.
and part of that can be I just am always anxious. Help me understand it. And here at the institute, we train counselors to figure that out.
I like what you talked about, John, in that fear is a basic human emotion, which means that it's been around forever, right? Way back in the day, the idea of fear, the feeling of fear, really is nothing new, but the way in which we perceive it and perhaps act on it and our access to it perhaps has changed over the years. Just to give you and our listeners a little bit of some updated statistics on this, when we talk about Halloween, we oftentimes think about horror movies, scary movies out there that are meant to elicit fear in the viewers, right, as they watch it or you walk through a haunted house. Even just last year, it looked horror movies grossed over $800 million domestically. And I thought this was interesting. Since 1995, horror movies have more than doubled their market share in the United States. So I know as you talk about fear itself is not new. However, the role of fear as kind of a survival mechanism or the manner in which we talk about fear has adapted over the years. Can you maybe talk about that change to today?
Yeah, actually, it's a big deal, and things have changed. But the fear hasn't really adapted to us. What has changed is our understanding of what might be dangerous changes with our context, and our context is very different now, with especially the immediacy of all the signals we get these days. That's why a long time ago, maybe your big fear was that a wolf might eat you when you go into your
Mhm.
crops, and jump out and okay, that's pretty specific, right?
Right.
But now, get online and you look at a toxic carjacking Instagram or something about the future, or is global warming going to work or not work with people? And you feel anxiety because there are more things to feel anxious about, even though there may be less things that are truly dangerous. The messaging we get this way, get in our direction, is more of that. So that's why you see more and more people have anxiety disorders and phobias and panic and that sort of thing, because not only do they have their own, you know, family of origin issues and hurts and those sorts of things from the character issues, but also we are bombarded with messages. So we have to be aware of that. And I'm a big fan of kind of limiting our time with our kids and ourselves so you don't go down the fear spiral.
You know, John, you made a great point that it kind of leads into almost irrational fears. So, I mean, there's ones that if something really bad's happening, causing anxiety, then yes, but there's a lot of irrational ones. And I think you said it before that maybe 80% of the things we worry about never happens in one of your videos. And so
I think it's 85.
there you go. It's up to 85 now.
So now you even feel better than when it was 80. So
That's right. That's right. It's a little brighter day. So, but many people struggle with these irrational fears or their phobias. You know, what psychological techniques or therapies are most effective in helping individuals overcome these fears?
yeah, it's so fortunate. I'm going to say something kind of weird, I think, Gilbert. It's a good day to be fearful and anxious.
Oh,
Meaning there are more tools, there are more approaches than there ever were, and they're very, very effective. You don't have to go straight to medication. Sometimes it takes that, but there are lots of things you can do to not have to do that. And so here at the Institute, we use what's called the Townsend growth model. And I'll talk about how that addresses fear and anxiety, because our overall approach to whether it's counseling or leadership or coaching, it's founded on the partnership that my close friend and coworker, Henry Cloud, and I engaged in research and model construction and our thoughts and our clinical work together. And now over the past several years, I've added my own constructs and ideas. But here's some of the ways that the model addressed them. One of it is a thing called exposure, generalized exposure. And it's an aspect of cognitive behavior work. It's an aspect of what we do. And that's when whatever you're afraid of, you get more and more exposure to gradually over time. And and you kind of it's like going to the gym. You can do more sit-ups and more crunches over time as you practice. So suppose somebody's afraid of flying, and that's a kind of a big deal with travelers. And what a person can do is maybe get a video up of being in a plane or whatever, and you talk with an experienced person, a good therapist, about it, how you feel, how can you tolerate, I can be here 1 minute, I can be here 4 minutes or whatever. Oops, I'm too scared. And you try it again later and later. And after several exposures, depending on how severe it is, your brain kind of says it's a safe place. There's another one, and it's a depth approach, which is also an aspect that we teach at the Institute. It's when the issue is part of a character injury, what we call a character injury. Maybe a fear of being alone, or a fear of being intruded on, or controlled or judged by someone. You have to understand the early relational roots that get internalized into our heads, and then help the person heal and strengthen and forgive. That's very powerful. Another approach is experientials, and experientials are when we kind of do a role play or an enactment of something. We're bringing all the emotions to place in a safe place, like with a good therapist, a good group, and you role play facing the fearful person, for example, maybe the person that bullied you or the person that judged you, and then you safely express the emotions you needed to express that you weren't able to, and your anxiety begins to drop down. And then one other thing is important on a technique level for all you people that like this kind of stuff. There are defensive fears, and defensive fears are fears that are protecting us from another feeling. And many times anxiety protects us from feelings that we don't feel like okay. For example, some people feel like anger is not okay. I'll be a mean person, or somebody be mad at me. So when they're really kind of, mad, somebody does something really inappropriate, they'll feel anxiety instead of, I'm kind of ticked off at you. They'll have a defensive fear because anxiety is a little more acceptable socially. Or when they're really sad and they feel like there's been a loss in their life and something they need to let go, but they're afraid people will make fun of them or say you're just being a big baby. So instead of having a normal grief process, they'll feel anxiety. So it's good to really make sure that the fear you're dealing with is really the signal, or it's defending against something that's prohibited or you feel like is unacceptable.
So John, I think about this. At the institute, we have trained professionals that come in, and with our students when we're in groups. It helps us look at our feelings, right? How they come out, how we express them, and sometimes the anxieties and fears, and how it really kind of impedes us personally and professionally. And I just think this really hits home when we're talking about this, how the growth model and some of these things really have been beneficial to our students.
It really has, Gilbert. I mean, we've been so blessed to see that with our students now for a number of years. Each group of students that comes in, right, every term, and you see some of those revelations that happen in that process group experience, and it's great. It made me think too, as John was talking about that underlying emotion, right? Again, so many times it's the fear of being lonely or being sad or not measuring up and being enough. And so we see that not just with those are, of course, going on to be counselors, but in our leaders as well, that kind of imposter syndrome. Here I am in a leadership position. Can I
Yeah.
do it? Our executive coaches. And it can sometimes be just downright paralyzing,
Mhm.
right? You see sometimes leaders get so scared of making a wrong move that sometimes they don't make any move. And we know that can be just as debilitating to an organization, even a family. So, John, can you touch on that a little bit? The decision making aspect of it and how fear can really just influence, sometimes even stall the decision making process.
Absolutely. And it's so true, guys. When you look at decision making in general, I mean, we have to make a decision from little stuff like, I'm going to buy a bicycle to who am I going to fall in love with or what's my career going to be. And this is kind of life. A friend of mine, Craig Groeschel, he's a great writer. I've been looking at his new book about decision making, this sort of thing. He had found some research that says we make 35,000 decisions a day. Now, if that doesn't get you anxious
Wow.
about the pressure to do that right, and when you look at decisions, all those 35,000, every decision can be broken down, I think, into two aspects. One is risk and one's reward.
Mhm.
If I want to take this, what's my reward if I get this bicycle? I mean, it works great, and it's got 20,000 gears, and it's very light, titanium or whatever is good now. What's the risk? Well, cost is going to be up there, and I've got to be careful because if I'm too much on the road, it could be an accident. I've got kids. Everything is always about risk versus reward, and obviously, fear is not about the reward part. Fear is about the risk part. So when you look at that equation about your decisions, fear is about the risk part. So there's some things that don't help us about fear that we shouldn't do. I'm going to list those, and I'll talk about a second about what to do with fear in terms of the risk part. One is people say, well, don't listen to your fear. I think that's really dumb. There's a reason you have the fear.
Say
And
that again, John. What's dumb? Say it again. Don't
saying I'm not
listen.
going to listen to my fear is
There you
dumb.
go. Yeah.
That's a psychological technical term. Don't be dumb. because because if it's the signal you
Yeah.
want to go into a situation with, I don't know, maybe you go into you're making a conversation with people you have no idea what kind of people are like. Are they going to be introverts, out extroverts? Are they going to be, tech people, real estate people? And you just say, oh, I don't care, I'll just be me, and you end up sounding like a goof. So the don't listen to it, you're not using the data that fear will give you. The next part is don't work through it. So just kind of say, okay, I'm afraid, but I won't be afraid because I'm a strong person. No, fear's your friend. So don't do this, don't work through it part and just kind of blow it off. But another one is don't just use your rationality by yourself. I mean, your rationality is great, but all the research in neuroscience says you've got to be able to use the feeling part, the fear part, all the emotion part, as well as the rational logical part. So those are the don'ts. But here's some things to do. When you get afraid, listen to it. Be curious about it. Move toward it. You have nothing to fear really there. And just kind of scratch your head and why in the world did I trigger when that person said that? Instead of, oh, don't be a baby. That's like Bob Newhart's video, Stop It. Just stop it. Try stopping it. You can't. So be curious, go, what's the why here? And
Mhm.
then once you think, maybe it's because it reminds me of something or a part of myself or an old relationship I had or a bad experience I had. Okay, that takes the power out of it. When you get to the why, a lot of the anxiety comes down from the fear. And then secondly, You've got to make it relational. Get some safe and sane people who care about you, who love you, who want your best to give you perspective on this decision. And that will what we call metabolize the fear. You'll go, yeah, I got scared because I had a loss there, or because I really screwed up last time and I don't want to do it again. But I realized where it came from. And some people told me they think I've got the chops to do it. Or our friends go, no, that's a really bad idea. That's how you
Mm.
make great decisions based on an accurate view of risk and reward.
I appreciate that, John, because sometimes you got to reality test some things in life. So, how does a Townsend growth model address people how they might handle fear in a healthy way?
Well, what we do, I think that kind of like helps us to help others, whether it's leaders or coaches or counselors, is to understand one thing is that of all the things the Bible says, one of the most, I think it's the most written down, repeated command in the Bible is guess what? Fear not.
Mhm.
So God
Mm.
wants us to, we may have to feel it, but we got to do something with it. So don't just get stuck with fear. Get into why the fear is there, and then you won't fear anymore. So most of the time, if it's something like very physical, like a fear, I got afraid that I ate something bad for me and I'm going to be sick. Those go away when the circumstance changes, right? But generally speaking, those fears and anxieties that don't go away after you've solved a problem mean there's something deeper. Then it's not a problem you got to solve. It's a roadmap. The fear is a roadmap to healing something that's broken
Mm,
inside you. Can I give you an example of that?
absolutely.
Yes,
Yeah.
please do.
I had a client, a couples, and I started seeing them. They had marital issues, and the wife was really fearful that her husband was emotionally unfaithful all the time, that he was having emotional affairs, that he was being too flirty with a next door neighbor woman or work colleagues or friends of hers. And, she was just really scared all the time that he wasn't a truthful, trusting guy. And as I got to know him, I didn't see that. I didn't see that part of him. I mean, a lot of people can fake it, right? But I couldn't see it. He was very faithful and loved her to pieces. And he was getting discouraged, actually, that she'd never trust him again. And so I got some more history on her, and I found out, guess what? Her father had had multiple affairs, and it
Mm.
had been devastating for their relationship, devastating for the family, definitely devastating to watch his mom go through that hell. But nobody had ever told her, go into the fear and figure it out. So what did she do? She's very, very smart, very, very good business person. So guess what she did? She repressed it and got busy. I just won't think about it and I'll get busy. So what we know from the neuroscience about feelings is that they don't get buried dead. They get buried alive. And
Mm.
when you say it's not okay to say it, it's going to come out in some other way.
Right.
She never felt it. She never grieved it. She never actually forgave her dad.
Mm.
So we worked on that process. And guess what happened? Her trust came up of him because she'd worked out the original issue. So when you're curious about it and you realize it's not a problem, it's a roadmap, everything gets better. Now, I have to say, when I tell this story, guys, a lot of people that listen to our podcast, I'm sure they've been around gaslighting people, either a spouse or a mom or a dad or a friend. And absolutely, if there's gaslighting, you've got to have other people around. You've got to have you have to know what the signs are when they're not truthful, this sort of thing. I'm not in any way saying, oh gosh, the reason right now that you don't trust this person in your life is because you had something happen. Could be, but I want to make sure I respect the idea of gaslighting being a problem as well. So just keep that as a little caveat.
That's really helpful, John. I appreciate it. You've provided our listeners, and us here just so many strategies and additional things to think of when we, again, think and feel fear and knowing that it's so much deeper than just maybe that scary movie that we're seeing or that
Mhm.
reoccurring nightmare that we're having. And I appreciate too that so many of these strategies, while we talk at it more from the lens of working with adults, right, and graduate students in our programs and things like that, a lot of these strategies can be used too with younger audiences. So those that have family members or little, mentees or even young people coming up in your organizations and trying to kind of identify what's the root of what they're experiencing. As we near the end here, we of course always end with a certain question, but we're gonna double that up. I have two final questions for you here today, Dr. Townsend. One, of course, is what is your takeaway tip that you have for our audience today? But the second one is, what's your favorite Halloween candy? What are you putting in your bucket?
Oh, the first one I can do pretty quickly. The second one is, well, it's going to be fun, but it's going to take us some time. Being a recovering sugaraholic. On a tip level, guys, it's when you get afraid, don't do the normal knee-jerk response of, I must be okay. Don't think about it. Become curious. And that's not natural. Dogs aren't curious about their fear. They just go run away and hide. But we have rational abilities. So move into it because it's going to be your friend. Train yourself to go, why'd that happen? And you'll find so much help from that. One of my favorite verses in the Bible is in Psalm 139. And David says, search me and know me and try my anxious heart. So God searches us, and we need to be in that process of searching out. Oh my gosh. This isn't fear now. This is desire. Halloween candy. I would say from childhood, there was something about those crackle candies that was chocolate on the outside and Rice Krispies on the inside.
Yep.
And I could just have those breakfast, lunch, and dinner. It was my fave.
That's a good choice. I like it.
That's a good one.
Great.
That's a good one.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for your time today, John. We appreciate it, and happy Halloween to you.
Same to everybody. If you enjoy the Townsend Institute podcast series, head to our website at cui.edu/Townsend to find out more about the certificates, bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees offered through Concordia University, Irvine. With programs in mental health counseling, executive coaching and consulting, and organizational leadership, we have a variety of faith-based programs dedicated to helping you fulfill your academic and professional goals, all the while furthering your competence, character, and connection. Again, that's cui.edu/Townsend.
Say mine, Twix. I'm a Twix fan.
It's got the Twix or the chocolate on the outside, and they've got the caramel on the inside.
Oh yeah.
Yes. Yes.
The cookie. Yep.
Can't beat it.
I know.
Mine was king size Snickers.
That's hard to beat.
Yeah.
Not the mini, not the individually.
No.
Gilbert has to go for king size.
There was like a doctor, maybe a dentist, which is funny that he gave this out. Maybe it helped his business later. But we all knew to go to Dr. Long. He gave the king size Snickers, so we all lined up there.
He must have had, he must have had wash tubs full for all the kids. Those are big things.
Well, our town's not that big, so but we lined up.